The Galactic Dominion had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had conquered 12,000 worlds. They had crushed rebellions, destroyed planets, and made entire species bow before their power. Their emperor, the Undying, sat upon a throne made from the bones of fallen kings. No one in the known galaxy dared to speak his name without trembling. When their scout ships first detected Earth, the analysts in the Imperial Survey Corps marked it as a simple target. It was a small blue planet orbiting a medium-sized yellow star in an unremarkable corner of the Milky Way. The dominant species called themselves humans. They had nuclear weapons, basic space travel, and absolutely no idea that they were not alone in the universe. The Imperial Council met to discuss the conquest. It took them exactly 4 minutes to approve it. "Send Ambassador Lan," ordered High Admiral. "Let him deliver the standard proclamation. This world will fall within the week." Ambassador Lan was perfect for the job. He stood 7 feet tall. His body was covered in black armor made from the compressed matter of dead stars. His face was that of a giant insect, with mandibles that could crush stone and eyes that glowed with inner fire. He had delivered the proclamation of surrender to over 200 worlds. Every single one of them had fallen to their knees in terror. The invasion fleet arrived on a Tuesday morning. 10,000 warships blocked out the sun over every major city on Earth. Each ship was the size of a small mountain. Their weapons could turn continents into glass. They arranged themselves in the ancient formation called the Fist of Submission, a pattern that had made countless civilizations weep with despair. Lan's personal shuttle descended through the clouds above New York City. People on the streets stopped and stared. Cars crashed into each other. Someone dropped their coffee. The whole world held its breath as the alien craft landed in front of the United Nations building. Inside the General Assembly Hall, every nation on Earth had sent their representatives. Presidents, prime ministers, kings, and diplomats sat in nervous silence. Television cameras broadcast the scene to 8 billion people around the planet. This was the most important moment in human history. The great doors of the assembly hall opened with a dramatic boom. Smoke poured in from hidden machines in Lan's shuttle. It was all part of the show. The Dominion had learned long ago that presentation mattered. Fear was a tool, and they had mastered its use. Lan strode into the hall. His armored boots echoed on the marble floor. Behind him floated 2 combat drones, their weapons humming with barely contained energy. On his belt hung the skulls of 12 conquered kings, each one preserved in crystal. In his hand, he carried a ceremonial staff that crackled with plasma fire. Above the building, a holographic projection filled the sky. It showed the Imperial fleet in all its terrible glory. It showed planets burning. It showed the Emperor himself, ancient and terrible, sitting upon his throne of bones. Lan reached the center of the hall. He activated his translator device and spoke in a voice that shook the windows. "Creatures of Earth," he announced, "I am Ambassador Lan of the Galactic Dominion. I speak with the voice of Emperor the Undying, Master of Stars, Crusher of Worlds, the eternal shadow that falls upon all life." He paused for effect. This was usually the moment when the screaming started. "Your planet has been deemed acceptable for absorption into the Empire. You have 2 choices. Submit now, pledge your eternal loyalty to the Emperor, and your species will be allowed to serve. Refuse, and your world will burn. Your cities will become ash. Your people will become a memory. This is the will of the Dominion. This is the fate of all who stand before us." Lan raised his plasma staff high. Lightning crackled around it. The holographic display showed a planet exploding in beautiful, terrible detail. "Kneel," he commanded. "Kneel before the might of the Galactic Dominion, or face complete annihilation." Silence filled the hall. Lan waited. He had done this many times before. Usually, by now, someone would be crying. Someone would be begging. The leaders would be arguing about how quickly they could surrender. But the humans just sat there. They looked at him. They looked at his armor. They looked at the skulls on his belt and the plasma staff in his hand. They looked at the holographic fleet in the sky. Then someone in the back row made a strange sound. It was a short, sharp noise that burst out of them like they could not control it. The human tried to cover their mouth, but it was too late. Another human made the same sound, then another, then 10 more. Lan did not understand what was happening. These noises were not in his database. They did not match any known fear response. The Secretary General of the United Nations, a dignified woman from Kenya named Doctor, rose from her seat. Her shoulders were shaking. Her hand was pressed against her chest. Tears were forming in her eyes. "I apologize," she said, her voice trembling. "I am so sorry. This is very inappropriate, but I have to ask." She looked at his ceremonial staff. She looked at his skull belt. She looked at his shoulder spikes that rose 2 feet above his head. Did you design that outfit yourself?" The dam broke. The entire General Assembly exploded into laughter. Hundreds of humans howled with uncontrollable amusement. They slapped their desks. They wiped tears from their eyes. They pointed at Lan's armor and laughed even harder. "The shoulder spikes," someone screamed. "Greg, look at the shoulder spikes. He's got skulls on his belt, actual skulls. This is amazing. This is the best thing I've ever seen." The delegate from Australia had fallen completely out of his chair. He was lying on the floor, holding his stomach, making sounds like a dying animal. The representative from Japan was taking photographs with her phone. The British ambassador was trying very hard to maintain his composure and failing completely. Lan stood frozen. In 300 years of diplomatic service, nothing like this had ever happened. His translator was working overtime, trying to explain what laughter meant, but he could not process it. "Stop," he commanded. "Stop this at once. I demand respect. I am the voice of the Emperor." "The voice of the Emperor," someone repeated, and the laughter doubled. Doctor had managed to compose herself slightly. She walked toward Lan, still fighting back giggles. "Please understand," she said. "We mean no disrespect. Well, actually, we might mean a little disrespect, but you have to see this from our perspective." She gestured at his armor, his staff, his belt of skulls. "We have seen this before," she explained. "In our movies, in our video games, in our comic books. You look like a villain from a story we would tell our children. The skull belt, we call that trying too hard. The shoulder spikes, those went out of fashion in our fiction 30 years ago." Lan's mandibles clicked in confusion. "You have seen this before." "Many times," Doctor said. "We have imagined alien invasions 1,000 different ways. Yours is very classic, very traditional." She smiled kindly. "We appreciate the effort you put into the presentation. The smoke machines were a nice touch." Behind her, the General Assembly was still laughing. Someone had started playing dramatic music from their phone to match the holographic display. Others were posing for selfies with the combat drones. Lan realized with growing horror that he had lost control of the situation entirely. For the first time in his long career, he had no idea what to do next. He did the only thing he could think of. He called for backup. High Admiral had commanded the Imperial fleet for over 300 years. She had witnessed the fall of empires. She had watched stars die. She had personally overseen the destruction of 17 rebellious worlds and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Nothing in her long life had prepared her for what she was watching now. On the main screen of the flagship Devastation's Promise, Ambassador Lan stood in the human assembly hall. Around him, the creatures of Earth continued to make that strange barking noise. They were holding small devices and pointing them at him. Some had gathered around his combat drones and were making strange poses beside them. "What are they doing?" asked her second-in-command. Commander studied the data streams carefully. "According to our analysis, they are taking photographs. They appear to be." documenting the moment for personal enjoyment. Enjoyment, we are threatening to destroy their planet. Yes, Admiral, they seem to find that amusing. Felt a cold sensation in her stomach. She had felt this once before, many centuries ago, when she was a young officer who had made a terrible mistake in front of her superiors. The humans had a word for it. Her translator supplied it after a moment. Embarrassment. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on the mission. Order Land to demonstrate our power, have him destroy something, a building perhaps, show them we are serious. The order went down to the planet. Land received it with visible relief. Finally, something he knew how to do. He raised his plasma staff and pointed it at a decorative fountain outside the building. With a flash of brilliant light, the fountain exploded into steam and molten stone. The ground shook. Car alarms went off for blocks around. The human stopped laughing, allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. Now they would understand. Now they would. The humans started cheering. That was awesome, someone shouted. Do it again, do the statue next. Can you make it change colors? My kid would love that. A small human child had somehow gotten into the building. She walked right up to Lan and tugged on his armored leg. Mr. Alien, she said, looking up at him with wide eyes, are you a good guy or a bad guy? Because you look like a bad guy, but my mom says we shouldn't judge people by how they look. Lan had no idea how to respond. His training had not covered this situation. I am the voice of the Emperor, he said weakly. Cool, said the child. Do you want to see my drawings? I drew a spaceship yesterday. Back on the flagship, Admiral put her head in her hands. The situation grew worse by the hour. The humans had something called the Internet, which was apparently a vast network that connected all of their information systems together. Within minutes of Lan's arrival, images and videos of him had spread across the entire planet. The Imperial Intelligence Division monitored everything. They watched in horror as the humans began to modify the images of their ambassador. They put colorful hats on his head. They added musical instruments to his hands. They created animated versions of him dancing to primitive human music. Someone had taken the Emperor's sacred proclamation of doom and edited it to include a rhythmic beat. Within 3 hours, it had been viewed 4 billion times. Humans were dancing to it in the streets. They have turned our threats into entertainment, reported, his voice hollow. They are calling it a meme. Our translation systems indicate this is a form of cultural sharing through humor. Humor, repeated. They are joking about their own annihilation. It appears so, Admiral. The worst part was the names they were giving everything. The Imperial fleet, which had conquered half a galaxy, was now being called the Rubber Duck Armada because someone had edited the holographic display to replace the warships with small yellow bathing toys. The Fist of Submission formation was being called Jazz Hands. Emperor himself was now known across Earth as Dramatic Uncle. Did not know who was. She was afraid to ask. Down on the planet, Lan was having the worst day of his career. The humans had surrounded him completely, but not in a threatening way. They were asking him questions. Endless questions. What do you eat? Do you have a family? How fast can your ships go? Is the Emperor single? Does your species have music? Can I touch your armor? It looks really cool. Did you make it yourself or did someone make it for you? A human journalist had pushed through the crowd with a microphone. Ambassador Lan, she said, our viewers want to know what made the Galactic Dominion choose Earth for invasion. Was it our resources, our strategic location, our potential as a labor force? Lan tried to recover some dignity. Your world was selected because it is weak. Your species is primitive. Your technology is laughable. You were meant to be an easy conquest. He expected anger. He expected fear. He expected something. The journalist just nodded thoughtfully. So we were basically the galactic equivalent of a participation trophy. Got it, She turned to her camera. "You heard it here first, folks. We're the easy mode of alien invasions." The crowd laughed again. Somewhere during the next hour, things took an even stranger turn. The humans started offering Land food. They brought him something called pizza, and something called tacos, and something called a really good sandwich from that place on Fifth Avenue. "You have to try this," said a young human male, holding out a piece of fried dough covered in sugar. It's basically the only good thing our species has ever created." "I cannot eat your food," Land said. "I am here to conquer you." Sure, the human said. "But you can conquer us after lunch, right? Everyone needs to eat." To his own amazement, Land found himself accepting it was, he had to admit, quite good. Back on the flagship, Admiral made a decision. The standard approach was clearly not working. They needed to consult with Imperial High Command. They needed to speak with the Emperor himself. She opened a priority channel to the Imperial Palace. Emperor's ancient face appeared on the screen. His eyes glowed with the cold fire of a being who had lived for 9 centuries. His voice was like thunder in the depths of space. "Admiral," he said, "I have been watching the reports from Earth. Explain to me what is happening." "Magnificent One," said, bowing her head, "the humans are not responding as expected." "I can see that. They appear to be feeding my ambassador pastries." "Yes, Magnificent One. They are also creating what they call fan art of him. Some of it is quite flattering, some of it is less so." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. "In 900 years," he finally said, "no species has ever reacted to our threats with laughter. Not once. The fear of the Dominion is absolute." It was, Magnificent One, until now. On the screen behind her, a new human broadcast was playing. Someone had created a puppet version of Lan and was using it to sell insurance. The puppet danced and waved its tiny plasma staff while a cheerful song played. "Get conquered by high prices, not with Galaxy Insurance. Will protect you from any threat, even ones with silly skull belts." Emperor watched the puppet dance. "Summon my advisors," he said quietly. "All of them. We need to understand these creatures." "What shall we do with the fleet, Magnificent One?" The Emperor considered the question. For the first time in living memory, he seemed uncertain. "Tell them to wait," he said. "Destroying the planet will always be an option. But first, I need to know why these humans are not afraid." He paused. "And find out what a is. Several billion of them seem to think I am related to one." 3 weeks had passed since the Galactic Dominion arrived at Earth, and nothing had gone according to plan. The fleet still hung in orbit, its 10,000 warships casting shadows over the planet below. The weapons were still charged. The soldiers were still ready, but no orders came to attack. Instead, the Imperial Command had issued a single instruction: observe and study. Ambassador Lan had been recalled to the flagship after what the official reports called a diplomatic incident, but what everyone privately called the situation. He spent his days in his quarters, refusing to speak to anyone. The combat drones he had brought to Earth now sat in a storage bay. Someone had stuck a small flag on one of them that said, "I visited Earth and all I got was this tiny flag." Admiral had assembled the greatest minds in the Dominion to analyze the human problem, who had studied 1,000 species, psychologists who understood the deepest fears of every known life form, military strategists who had planned the conquest of star systems. They all gathered in the flagship's main conference room, surrounded by screens showing Earth's global communications. The lead, an ancient creature named who had served 5 different emperors, presented his findings first. "The humans," he began, "are not what we expected." "Obviously," muttered someone in the back. Their psychological profile suggested they would be easy to intimidate. They are a young species, barely a few 100,000 years old. They have limited technology. They fight among themselves constantly. They should have collapsed in fear the moment they saw our fleet. Pulled up a chart on the main display. But we failed to account for something unusual in their development. The humans have a trait that no other species in our records has developed to such an extreme degree. What trait? Asked Admiral. Imagination. The room fell silent. Imagination, continued, is the ability to create detailed mental pictures of things that do not exist. Many species have some capacity for this, but humans have turned it into an obsession. They spend enormous amounts of their time and resources creating fictional stories. They call it entertainment. He pressed a button and the screens filled with images. Movies, television shows, books, video games, comic books, paintings, sculptures. Thousands of years of human creativity scrolled past. They have imagined everything, said. Every possible future, every possible threat. They have told themselves stories about alien invasions for over a century. They have created villains far more terrifying than anything in our actual history. He showed them images of human fiction. Massive space empires with planet-killing weapons, hive-mind insects that consumed entire worlds, dark lords in black armor who commanded the forces of evil, cosmic horrors from beyond space and time, robots that rose up against their creators, diseases that wiped out civilization. The humans have imagined all of this, said, and then they did something remarkable. They laughed at it. He showed them clips from human entertainment, people making jokes about the end of the world, comedy shows about evil emperors, parodies of alien invasions, horror movies that audiences watched while eating popcorn. They have processed their fears through humor. They have taken every terrifying scenario they could imagine and turned it into a story, a game, a joke. By the time we arrived, they had already imagined us. They had already made fun of us. Admiral felt a chill run through her body. Are you saying they expected us? Not specifically, but they expected something like us. When they saw Ambassador land with his skull belt and plasma staff, they did not see a terrifying conqueror. They saw a character from their stories, a villain they had already invented, explored, and dismissed as a. The military strategist, a veteran named X, slammed his fist on the table. Then we show them something they have not imagined. We destroy a city. We demonstrate real power, not fictional threats. We considered that, said calmly. It would not work. Why not? Because they have imagined that too. They have told stories about cities being destroyed many times. They have created detailed simulations of nuclear war, asteroid impacts, and alien attacks. They know exactly what destruction looks like. Some of them have even made plans for how to survive it. He pulled up another set of data. More importantly, they have a psychological defense mechanism that no other species possesses. When faced with overwhelming threats, they do not freeze or flee. They make jokes. They create art. They find ways to laugh in the face of death. That is insane, said X. Yes, agreed. By any reasonable standard, humans are completely insane. They live on a planet that regularly tries to kill them with earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, and diseases. They have fought wars that killed millions of their own kind. They have built weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization and then pointed those weapons at each other. And through all of this, they have survived. They have thrived. They have looked into the darkness and made funny pictures about it. The room was silent. Admiral spoke slowly. So what you are telling me is that we cannot frighten them because they have already frightened themselves with worse scenarios than we could ever create. Essentially, yes. Our standard psychological weapons are useless. Our threatening appearance actually works against us because it matches their fictional villains too closely. The more dramatic we are, the more they will laugh. Then what do we do? Hesitated. In all his centuries of service, he had never had to answer a question like this. I do not know, he admitted. The humans are unique. Every other species we have encountered could be understood through fear. The humans have evolved beyond fear. They have turned terror into entertainment. They have made horror into a hobby. The meeting continued for hours. They discussed every possible approach. Direct assault was rejected because it would only prove the humans right about their fictional scenarios. Economic pressure was impossible because the humans did not yet participate in galactic trade. Cultural manipulation was attempted but failed when the humans simply absorbed the Dominion's propaganda and turned it into more memes. Meanwhile, on Earth, something unexpected was happening. The initial shock of alien contact had worn off. The humans had returned to their normal lives, but with one addition. They were now fascinated by the Galactic Dominion, not afraid, fascinated. Scientists wanted to study the alien technology. Artists wanted to design new versions of the Imperial armor. Writers wanted to create stories about the Dominion. Musicians had already written 17 different songs about Emperor. A group of humans had organized something called Dominion Con, which was apparently a gathering where people would dress up like Imperial soldiers and celebrate Dominion culture. It was scheduled for the following month. Thousands of tickets had already sold. The humans were not treating the invasion as a crisis. They were treating it as an opportunity. Back on the flagship, Admiral received a message from Earth. It was from the United Nations Secretary-General, Dr. Dear Admiral, the message read, we have noticed that your fleet has been in orbit for 3 weeks without taking any action. Some of our people are starting to worry that you are getting bored up there. We would like to invite you and your crew to visit Earth as guests, not as conquerors. We have many questions about your culture, your history, and your technology. We also have many things we would like to show you. Please consider this invitation. Also, please tell Ambassador Land that the little girl who asked him about being a good guy or bad guy made him a picture. It is of him as a superhero. She would like him to have it. Admiral read the message 3 times. The humans were inviting their would-be conquerors to come down and visit. They were offering friendship instead of surrender. They were sending drawings made by children. For the first time in her 300-year career, Admiral had no idea what to do. She forwarded the message to the Emperor and waited for guidance. Emperor the Undying sat alone in his throne room, surrounded by darkness. The great chamber stretched for hundreds of meters in every direction. The walls were lined with the banners of conquered civilizations, each one representing a world that had bowed before the Dominion. 12,000 banners, 12,000 victories. But tonight, the Emperor was not thinking about his victories. He was thinking about Earth. For 900 years had ruled the galaxy through fear. It was the only reliable method. Species were different in many ways, but they all understood fear. The threat of death united all living things. Make them afraid and they would obey. It was simple. It was effective. It had never failed. Until now. The reports from Earth filled his mind like poison. The humans were not afraid. They were making jokes. They were creating art. They were selling merchandise. Somewhere on that small blue planet, a human company was manufacturing small statues of him to sell as novelty items. The statues could be made to say his proclamation of doom by pressing a button on the base. Tremble before me, the tiny statue said in a squeaky voice. I am the Undying. It was the best-selling toy of the season. The door to the throne room opened. Chief Advisor entered, his robes sweeping across the black marble floor. He was the oldest and of the Emperor's council, a being who had served the throne for over 1,000 years. You summoned me, magnificent one. Tell me about humans, said. Tell me everything. Bowed and began his report. Humans are a young species, magnificent one. They evolved on Earth approximately 300,000 years ago. For most of that time, they lived as primitive hunters and gatherers. Their civilization began only about 10,000 years ago. Yet they do not fear us. No, magnificent one, and our researchers believe they understand why. activated a holographic display. It showed the history of Earth, compressed into a visual timeline. The human world is dangerous, he explained. Their planet experiences regular disasters, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, floods, droughts, ice ages. The climate changes constantly. Diseases sweep across continents. Predators hunt in every environment. The display showed humans struggling against nature, building shelters, fighting animals, dying in storms and plagues. Unlike most intelligent species, humans did not evolve on a stable world. They evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill them. Every day was a fight for survival. This shaped their psychology in unusual ways. How so? They developed what they call dark humor, Magnificent One. When surrounded by death and danger, they learned to laugh at it. They found that fear was exhausting, so they invented ways to process it. They told stories about monsters and then made those monsters into jokes. They looked at the worst possibilities and found ways to smile. The display showed human history, wars that killed millions, diseases that wiped out half of continents, the development of nuclear weapons capable of destroying all life on Earth. They have been through things that would break most species, said. They have stared into the void many times. They have faced extinction scenarios that our own civilization would consider unimaginable. And each time they survived. They found a way to keep going. Emperor watched the display with growing unease. They invented weapons that could destroy their own world, continued. During something called the Cold War, two great nations pointed these weapons at each other for 40 years. Every day, the humans lived with the knowledge that their civilization could end in minutes. Children were taught what to do when the bombs fell. Everyone knew that death could come at any moment. And how did they respond to this? They made jokes about it. They created entertainment about nuclear war. They wrote songs about the end of the world. They developed an attitude that our psychologists find almost incomprehensible. They decided that if they could not control their fate, they would at least control their attitude toward it. Pulled up a human phrase from his database. They have a saying, Magnificent One, laugh in the face of death because crying will not help. This philosophy is central to their culture. They believe that maintaining their spirit is more important than avoiding danger. Emperor stood from his throne. He walked to the great window that looked out over the imperial capital. Billions of lights spread across the planet below, each one representing a subject who lived in fear of his power. You are telling me, he said slowly, that humans have already faced threats as great as the Dominion and survived. Not exactly, Magnificent One. The threats they faced were different, but their psychological response to those threats has made them immune to our standard tactics. Fear is our weapon, but they have developed immunity to fear. Terror is our tool, but they have learned to transform terror into laughter. And our appearance, our ceremonies, our proclamations. Hesitated before answering. They have already imagined us, Magnificent One. Their stories are full of dark emperors, evil empires, and alien invasions. Ambassador Land's armor, his skull belt, his plasma staff. These all match what humans call villain aesthetics. They have seen characters like him thousands of times in their fiction. They have learned to recognize the patterns and find them amusing rather than frightening. He pulled up more images from Earth's entertainment. Movie villains in dark armor. Evil emperors on thrones of bones, alien conquerors delivering dramatic speeches. Every one of them looked familiar. We are not original to them, said quietly. We are a trope. They have told stories about beings like us for generations. They have analyzed these stories, criticized them, made parodies of them, and moved on to new ideas. To them, we are outdated. The emperor was silent for a long time. What do they want? He finally asked. I'm sorry, Magnificent One. The humans, what do they want from us? Every species wants something. The X wanted to be left alone. The wanted power, the wanted knowledge. What do humans want? Checked his data carefully before answering. They want to talk to us, Magnificent One. They want to learn about our culture. They want to share their stories and hear ours. They want to know where we came from and how we built our empire. They want. He paused, struggling to find the right words. They want to be friends. Emperor turned from the window. His ancient face showed an emotion that no one had seen there in centuries. Confusion. Friends, he repeated. We threaten to destroy their world and they want to be friends. The humans have a concept they call meeting people where they are, Magnificent One. They believe that understanding is better than conflict. They think that anyone, even an enemy, can become a friend if given the chance. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Perhaps, Magnificent One, but the humans have built their entire civilization on ridiculous ideas. They believe in things that do not exist. They hope for things that will never happen. They dream of futures that are impossible. And somehow, through all of this ridiculous behavior, they have survived everything their universe has thrown at them. Bowed his head. The humans are not a threat to the Dominion, Magnificent One, but they are something perhaps more dangerous. They are a mirror. They show us that fear is not the only way to survive. They show us that laughter can be stronger than terror. They show us possibilities we have never considered. Emperor returned to his throne. He sat in silence for many minutes, thinking thoughts that no one else could share. Contact the fleet, he finally said. Tell Admiral to accept the human invitation. We will send a delegation to Earth, not as conquerors, not as rulers, as observers. And then, Magnificent One. And then we will see what these humans have to teach us. After 900 years, perhaps it is time to learn something new. He paused. Also, have someone send me one of those talking statues. I want to see how accurate it is. 1 year had passed since the Galactic Dominion arrived at Earth. The anniversary was being celebrated across both worlds in ways that no one could have predicted. On Earth, humans had declared it First Contact Day. There were parades in every major city. Children wore plastic versions of Imperial armor. Street vendors sold snacks shaped like Dominion warships. In New York, a giant inflatable ambassador land floated above the parade route, waving cheerfully at the crowds below. On the Imperial, things were different, quieter, more confused, but something was definitely happening. Emperor sat in his private chambers watching human television. He had become addicted to it over the past months. There was so much variety: comedies, dramas, documentaries, sports, cooking shows, cartoons. The humans created thousands of hours of new content every day. Most of it was terrible. Some of it was brilliant. All of it was fascinating. Right now, he was watching something called a sitcom about a family living in a small house. Nothing exploded. No one died. The biggest conflict was about who would use the bathroom first in the morning. It was absolutely pointless. He could not stop watching. A knock came at his door. Admiral entered, looking more relaxed than she had in years. Her uniform had been modified slightly. Instead of the traditional skull decorations, she now wore a small pin shaped like a yellow rubber duck. It was a gift from a human child she had met during her visit to Earth. The delegation has returned, Magnificent One, she reported. They bring news from Earth. Good news or bad news? Complicated news, Magnificent One. Turned off his television and gave her his full attention. Over the past year, the delegation he had sent to Earth had grown from a small observation team to a full cultural exchange program. Thousands of Dominion citizens had now visited the human world. Hundreds of humans had traveled to Imperial space. The results had been unexpected. Tell me, he said. The humans have made us an offer, said. They want us to join something called the United Federation of Planets. I am not familiar with that organization. It does not exist, Magnificent One. It is fictional. It comes from one of their television programs about space exploration, but they want to make it real. They want to create an actual organization based on their fictional one, and they want the Dominion to be the first member. Consider this. They want us to join an organization that does not exist. That is correct, Magnificent One. An organization based on a story they made up. Yes, Magnificent One. That is the most human thing I have ever heard. Smiled slightly. There is more, Magnificent One. They have also invited you personally to visit Earth. They want to give you something called an honorary doctorate from several of their universities. They say your longevity and leadership experience would be valuable in their academic discussions. They want me to become a teacher. In a sense, Magnificent One. They also want you to appear on something called a talk show. It is a program where famous people sit on a comfortable couch and answer questions while an audience watches. They say you would be very popular. Tried to imagine himself sitting on a couch, answering questions from a human host. A year ago, the idea would have seemed insane. Now he was not so sure. What has happened to us? He asked quietly. We came to Earth as conquerors. Now we are being invited to join their organizations and appear on their entertainment programs. Took a seat across from him. This casual behavior would have been unthinkable a year ago. Emperors were not approached casually, but things had changed. I have thought about this a great deal, Magnificent One, she said. I believe the humans did not defeat us through strength or cunning. They defeated us through something much more powerful. What is that? Perspective. She leaned forward. For 900 years you have ruled through fear, and fear works. It is effective. It keeps order, but it also has limits. Fear can control behavior, but it cannot create loyalty. Fear can force obedience, but it cannot inspire creativity. The Dominion has conquered 12,000 worlds, but what have we created? What new ideas have we developed? What art have we made? Had no answer. The humans face the same dangers we do, continued. Death, disease, disaster. But instead of trying to control these things through fear, they have learned to live alongside them. They laugh at what they cannot control. They create stories about their fears and transform those fears into entertainment. They refuse to let terror dominate their lives. She gestured at the television. Look at what they make. Thousands of stories every day. Some are serious, some are silly, but all of them represent something the Dominion has never valued: imagination. The humans spend their short lives dreaming about things that do not exist, and somehow, through all that dreaming, they have learned to be happy. Happy, repeated. The word felt strange in his mouth. When was the last time anyone in the Dominion had talked about happiness? I met a human family during my visit to Earth, said. They invited me to something called a barbecue. It is a ritual where people cook meat outdoors and talk about nothing important. There was no agenda, no purpose. They simply enjoyed being together. She paused. I had not realized it was possible to gather without purpose. Every meeting in the Dominion has an agenda. Every conversation has a goal. We have forgotten how to simply exist without trying to accomplish something. Thought about this for a long time. Outside his window, the imperial capital stretched to the horizon. Trillions of subjects lived their lives under his rule. They were obedient. They were productive. But were they happy? He did not know. He had never thought to ask. What do you suggest we do? He asked. I suggest we accept the human offer, said. Not because we have to, not because they defeated us, but because they have shown us something we had forgotten. There are other ways to live. There are other ways to organize a civilization. Fear is not the only answer. The other species we have conquered will see this as weakness. Perhaps, or perhaps they will see it as wisdom. Perhaps they are tired of fear as well. Stood and walked to his window. The view had not changed in centuries. The same buildings, the same streets, the same gray efficiency. He tried to imagine what the imperial capital would look like with some of the colors he had seen on Earth. Bright signs, public art, street performers, people gathering without purpose, simply enjoying each other's company. It was difficult to imagine, but not impossible. "Contact the human delegation," he said finally. "Tell them we accept their offer. The Galactic Dominion will join their united federation of planets. And the fleet, magnificent one. Keep it ready. Change takes time. Not everyone will understand immediately, but begin the process. Train the crews in diplomacy rather than conquest. Teach them to talk before they fight." He turned back to, "And schedule that talk show appearance. If I am going to change the way the galaxy works, I might as well explain why." 6 months later, Emperor the Undying sat on a comfortable couch in a television studio in Los Angeles. The audience was filled with humans who had waited months for tickets. Cameras broadcast his image to billions of viewers across Earth and hundreds of worlds beyond. "So, Emperor," the host said with a smile, "you've ruled the galaxy for 900 years. You've conquered thousands of planets, and now you're joining an organization based on a science fiction show. What made you change your mind?" Considered the question carefully. In the audience, he could see children wearing plastic versions of his crown. They were waving at him. Some of them had signs that said, "We love," with small hearts drawn around the words. "I came to Earth expecting to find a species I could frighten," he said. "Instead, I found a species that taught me something I had forgotten, that there is more to life than power and control, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is laugh at your fears, that the strongest empires are built on friendship, not conquest." He paused. "Your species is insane. You dream impossible dreams. You tell yourselves impossible stories. You refuse to accept that anything is hopeless. And because of that refusal, you have accomplished things that the rest of the galaxy said could not be done." The audience was silent, waiting. "I have lived for 900 years, said, "and in all that time I never met anyone who could teach me something new, until I met humanity." He smiled. It was a strange expression on his ancient face. He was still learning how to do it properly. "You asked what changed my mind. The answer is simple. I finally found something more powerful than fear." "What is that?" the host asked. "Hope," said the Emperor, "and perhaps a very good." The audience laughed. The cameras captured the moment. Across the galaxy, beings from 1,000 different species watched an ancient conqueror learn to smile. And somewhere, Ambassador Land sat in a small apartment on Earth, eating pizza and watching the broadcast. On his wall hung a drawing made by a little girl. It showed him as a superhero, flying through the sky with a cape flowing behind him. He had decided that he liked being a good guy better after all.